Okay, so good morning everyone and welcome to our second live session this week, focusing on the theme of communication. So today we'll be looking at a model that helps us to think about how we might need to think about how we communicate in order to influence and get the best from others. So in the chat, can you tell me how much of your job do you think is about communication? So do you think like 0%, 5, 10, 15, 20, 80, 85, 90, 100, 110? What percentage do you think your job is made up of communication? So pop it in the chat, get the chat box down here. 95, 100, 95, 100, 95, 70. Okay, so we're pretty high at the moment. The majority of us are saying kind of above 90. Anyone else? 75, okay. 70. All right, so a few of us are sort of hovering around the 70 mark, but the majority of us are saying kind of 90 and over. So it's like a huge part of our job is made up of communication. So if we're able to improve our communication at work, it means we're able to improve work and how productive we are and our relationships. Huge percentages of our role are made up from communication. So I just wanted to share with you this quote this morning from Susan Scott. She wrote a book, Fierce Conversations. I'll just give you a second to read through that. And I'd invite, has anyone got any reflections on that in terms of, she believes that, you know, our work and our relationships succeed, go well, or fail, depending on a conversation. Any thoughts or reflections on that? Jump on chat, jump on mic. Antonia saying absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely as well. For like, just so when you come to an interview, for example, that first impression, first conversation you have is what will probably be the decision making on if you get the job or not. So yeah, I agree with.
Yeah. And in our relationships, and whether that's work, personal, you know, it's this one conversation can kind of turn it positively or have a negative effect, can't it? So how we communicate and how we influence is really important in terms of how we're building those relationships in all of our life, not just at work. So if we think about communication, there's a spectrum. And at one end, we've got to tell. And at the other end, no, I'm trying to move my video at the same time. And at the other end, we've got ask. So basically, when we're communicating, we're often shifting along this spectrum. So at times we might be telling more, and at times we might be asking more. And so in our roles as managers, we're going to be flexing kind of between that when we're communicating. And we can all move up and down that spectrum, but we probably have got like a comfort zone along there. So perhaps we have a bit more of a preference for telling. Perhaps we have a bit more of a preference for sort of asking and inviting input. So if we just think about this spectrum in terms of our roles as managers, so either jumping on annotate on the slide or jumping on the mic to tell me. So if we were at the right hand side, so at tell end of the spectrum, let me get the marker, the laser pen. If we're at this end of the spectrum, as a manager, what kind of things would I be saying? Would I be doing? What kind of values might I be holding if I was right at this end of the spectrum? So can someone tell me? Type on the slide, jump on chat. Be expressing the end goals. Yep. Anything else? Being conscious of time frames. Yeah. What are some of the things I might be saying or doing at at this end? What kind of values might I hold? What's that? Driver. So it's got hidden underneath the teaching, coaching at the tail end. Okay. Anything else? Not inviting discussion from others. Yeah. Anything else? Okay. So if I was at that tail end, it'd be very much, as you say, about kind of not inviting discussion from others. So very much instructing, this is how we're going to do it, being very clear on what needs to be done. Sort of saying, I think we should do it this way, or this is how we're going to do it. And kind of the sort of values perhaps that I'm holding more at this end of the scale is sort of I've got the answer. And not really inviting discussion from others or input from others on that. So if you think right to the other side of the spectrum at that ask stage, if in a role as a manager, what are some of the things I might be saying or doing, or some of the values that I might be holding at this end of the spectrum? Collective views, so seeking collective views, yet valuing the opinion of others. Anything else? Discussing a bit more about the best way to proceed. Analytical approach. Do you think the analytical approach would be at the ask end or more at the tell end of communication, do you think? Demonstrating the importance of others to others' ideas, yes. Yep, using a bit more of a nurturing style here, yes, for sure. Anything else? Yeah, so if we're at this end, it's much more about seeking others' inputs. So we've got this problem, what are your thoughts on the best way to proceed? Inviting input and ideas, you said valuing the opinion of others. Someone saying team on individual approach. Yeah, so I think both asking at an individual level and the team. Definitely respectful at this end. So really seeking the inputs of others rather than sort of telling people what's going to happen, asking people what their thoughts are. So we will all move up and down the spectrum of communication daily, hourly perhaps. But we probably have a bit of a comfort zone in terms of where we might, and our job sometimes can also force us into being much more at one end of the spectrum than the other. I'd really invite you, so in the annotate button, there's the stamp function or the circles. I'd really love to see, and this, again, we're in a safe space, feel free and open, to show me on that spectrum, where do you feel most comfortable on that spectrum? So do you feel more comfortable at that more telling end, or more comfortable at the asking end? Okay, so we've got some people in the middle, some stars happening in the middle, some more towards the tell end, yeah. Some of you much more down towards the ask. Okay. Any more? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, yeah, I think that's everybody. Okay, so some of you saying sort of hovering, feel most comfortable in the middle. Some of you much more comfortable at that telling end, yes. Some of you kind of hovering a bit further down towards ask. Okay, and so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and I'm going to ask you to move your stamp. So I will clear that. Clear all those drawings and ask you another question. So when you're with your team, thinking about those of you who do manage a team, Where do you spend most of your time in this spectrum? So do you spend a lot of your time doing the telling, or do you spend a lot of time communicating by asking? So if you can mark on the spectrum, where do you spend most of your time communicating when you're with your team? And I know that some of you aren't necessarily with teams at the moment, so perhaps thinking back. Okay, so a few of you sort of straight down the middle. Again, one of you sort of feeling more towards the tell side, and quite a few of you more down towards the ask side of the spectrum. Okay, great. So I'm then going to ask you, where do you spend most of your time? Let me hang on, just clear this. Oh, let me clear. Oh, look, now I'm drawing a brown line. Clear all drawings. Where do you spend when you're communicating with your manager? Where on the spectrum do you spend most of your time? So communicating with your manager, are you at the ask or the tell stage, end of the spectrums? Okay, so perhaps quite a much more towards that asking end of the spectrum. Okay. So then thinking about when you are at home, let me just clear these off. Ooh. So when you're at home, so we're not at work anymore, where do you spend your time on the communication spectrum? Towards the ask or towards the tell? Oh, someone's very clear that they're at tell. Hovering around the middle at ask. Okay, interesting. Looks like a bit more of a preference up towards tell there for when you're at home. Okay, and someone's straight up at the top of the screen there. Okay, and finally, thinking about when you're under pressure, when you're really sort of, you've got a lot on, feeling really rushed, feeling a bit overwhelmed, feeling under pressure, where do you spend your time? Where are you on that spectrum when you're communicating? Okay. So there's a few of you still hovering down the middle. Quite a few of you moving towards tell as well. Yes, so when we're feeling stressed and under pressure, so similarly when we looked at the leadership styles, looking at situational leadership, when we're under pressure, it will often push us much more into that instructional style of leadership. And when we're under pressure, it'll often push us much more into that telling style of communication. Sort of, we won't be seeking other people's inputs, often because we feel like we just haven't got the time to hear it. And we'll be much more about, this is what we need to do, this is how we're going to do it, this is when we're going to do it by. Okay, so interesting that there was some movement in terms of those different situations about where we spend our time on that spectrum, depending on the different situations. And we can all move between those ends. We might have comfort zones, and it's good for us to recognize that and think about, if we're not getting what we want in terms of the communication with others, what might we need to be doing differently to get the best and to make sure that our communication is received well. So let me just clear those. So just seen. So again, this is This is Susan Scott as well, I think. So the quality of communication is measured by the response you get from it. Any responses to that quote? What does that make you think about? What does that make you think about? So an example, how many of you, perhaps particularly in your personal lives, so with your friends, your partners, your siblings, your family, you've said, you know, okay, so on Thursday night, we're going to go for dinner with Emma and Tom, and we're going to go to that Italian restaurant, and we really need to make sure that we're back by 6:30, so that we can get to the restaurant by 7. And we're on Monday, and your partner's like, yeah, great, or your friend or your brother or whatever. And then it gets to Thursday morning, and it's like, okay, so don't forget that you need to be back by 6:30. And they say, what? And you're like, but I told you. No, you didn't. I did. I told you on Sunday. No, you didn't. And so that kind of reaction, the response that you get from it. So what was the quality of my communication if the response I'm getting from it is, what? No, you didn't. So when we're thinking about, is my communication working, often being able to gauge in terms of that, what is the response that I'm getting from my communication? To be able to have more influence as well with others is also thinking about, how are we communicating and what might we need to be saying or doing differently in order to get the response that we want. So coming on to sharing a model with you. So it was developed by a married couple, actually, Bolton and Bolton. And in response to hearing regularly from organizations, companies, workplaces, that like, oh, communication just isn't good around here. Communication isn't working. And so they sort of set off to do research around, okay, so what is it about communication? Why is it not working? And what are some of the aspects that might be at play when we feel like either communication is going well, or when communication isn't getting the responses that we want, isn't being well received? And they came up with a model that looks at 4 kind of key elements. So they talk about, in terms of how some of us like to communicate, 2 axes. So if we focus first on the horizontal axis, so that kind of tell and ask that we looked at. So for some of us, we like to communicate much more in quite an assertive way, thinking about, just kind of got my map of the model here for my, thinking like we like to be direct, frank, and really thinking about like the strategic objectives of the team. And that can kind of come across as quite assertive. Whereas at the other end of the spectrum, on that left-hand side of the horizontal axis, where others respond or ask for response from others, are like keen to seek the input when they're communicating with others, sort of sharing perhaps their own ideas and then building on that with others. So it could also be sometimes faster at that assertiveness end. Perhaps the communication might be a little slower at that more asking stage. So different styles of communication on that horizontal axis. And then on that vertical axis, so what's called the responsiveness, is also about how we express ourselves when we communicate. So for some of us, at the bottom end here, in terms of feeling, we'll often express outwardly how we feel about things, like I love that or I hate that. So it's much more expressive in terms of how we communicate. It's not to say that those people are more or less passionate. It's just that they express how they're feeling, their emotion with that. So someone at this top end might feel equally enthusiastic or, you know, feel strongly about whatever. It's just that they won't necessarily communicate that outwardly. That they might communicate sort of maintaining more composure and more control. Whereas down here, it's like, I love it when that happens. Whereas here it'd be like, yeah, I think that's a really great idea. But it's not to say that either of them care more or less. It's just the way that they'll communicate that outwardly. Yeah. And so what that gives us is a combination of another 4 types, another four box grid, in terms of different styles that we will use. So in the combinations of whether we are more kind of analytical and thinking in our approach to communication, perhaps more expressive outwardly, more focusing on the task, and or sort of quiet logical communication. So from that very top line description, can anyone begin to identify where they might be on this model? Nadia, I just saw you.
I think I can be more analytical, no? Because I always think really carefully, you know, about what I have to say, you know.
Okay.
Usually, yes, because I always feel like, you know, display very responsible, no?
Okay.
So,
yeah. Anyone else able, like from that really top line, begin to identify where you might be on that? No? Okay, I'll talk it through a bit more and then maybe you'll be able to identify where you sit on that, on the model. So we'll start in the top right with the driver and then we'll work clockwise around the model. So sort of thinking, in fact, no, we won't. We'll start in the top left. So analytical. So the analytical style, so Nadia, maybe thinking if this is you, they are very much kind of oriented towards thinking and wanting to be right. Each style, I've got some kind of questions and some points around sort of some of their strengths, what some of their weaknesses might be. So for the green, for the analytical style, and remembering this is also about how people like to communicate and not about personality. So for those analytical types, strengths are like they are really good at planning and implementation, take a really logical and rational approach to communication, and always focus on the goal. What analytical types want is they want to be respected. So when you're communicating with someone with an analytical style, making sure that you're focusing around respect and inclusion. They also like a lot of information. So communicating with analytical style, you know that you're going to need to provide all of the detail. And they also like to focus on the perfect outcome. What they don't like are emotional decisions. So changeable personalities. So those who communicate a bit more expressively, the analyticals might often think, oh, this feels confusing, it feels chaotic. And they don't like it when they feel like their kind of skills and experience aren't valued. The weaknesses of the analytical style is because their focus is on, you know, they want to have a lot of information, they'll be communicating with a lot of perhaps words and numbers, data, can get them into what's known as analysis paralysis. So where you're not able to make a decision or move forward because you've just got so much information around you. They might sometimes, their focus might sometimes be around kind of why it won't work, and sort of at their worst can kind of engage in some of that like I told you so behavior. So each of these styles has great strengths, but it also has that kind of shadow side around what you might need to think about in terms of your development. So for the analytical style, very much about that thinking, logic, information, thoughtful, reserved, slow, perhaps a slower speed in terms of their communication. But what they need is they like to be right, and perhaps not be involved in lots of this and talking and animation. So some of you might begin to identify either some of that within yourself, or perhaps people that you work with. Any questions on the analytical style before we move on? No? Okay, so moving round to that top right hand corner. So red, this is the driver style. The driver style is very much oriented towards action. They're decisive, fast-paced in their communication, and they really need and want to focus on getting the results. So their strengths are about getting things done, moving forward fast. They're resourceful, they will create energy and purpose in their communications, and they're confident and decisive. What they want in this style is to be in control, clarity about objectives. So if you're communicating with someone of a driver style, it's really important to be very clear about what your expectations are. That's important for everyone, but they want to be clear on the objectives, know how things are progressing, and see things getting done. Their fears are around wasting time. So drivers want to communicate quickly. They fear not succeeding, and any kind of ambiguity or change. Driver styles kind of prefer is not their preference. Some of the weaknesses of this style is that they may only consider their own viewpoint, so very much at that tail end of the spectrum, not really inviting in others' input, and might kind of intimidate others to achieve. And the consequence of that is that it could upset people. So yeah, this driver style is very much about action-oriented, decisive, fast-paced, but it's really great to have a driver on your team because they will move things forward. In the same way as that analytical style, it's great to have someone with that analytical style of communication on the team because they'll really bring in all of the information, collect the data, look at things in a logical, analytical way, and a thoughtful approach. The drivers will bring that kind of more fast-paced and decisive element in their communication. So the third area is the expressives, the blue box at the bottom right-hand corner. So their strengths are creation, innovation. They are very much oriented towards spontaneity. They are enthusiastic. They also might talk very fast and talk quite animatedly as well. They are inspirational and visionary, and they'll often spot opportunities for improvement. They want to put their views forward. They love working with others, so communicating, getting other people's ideas, and they gain kudos, so they enjoy sort of status by achieving things and being visible and recognized. Some of their fears are kind of boring and detailed work, so kind of the opposite of the analytical style, who really wants to take in a lot of detail, information, thoughtful, considered approach. That's the kind of that's a fear for the expressive style. They also don't, a loss of status is important to them, or being viewed as not special. They liked their efforts to be recognized. So some of their weaknesses might be around kind of seeking attention. They can be easily distracted, and or there might not be any follow-up or completion, perhaps because they're just too busy being involved in creating new ideas. So again, like really a really enthusiastic communication style. Great to have an expressive on your team because they'll bring like fresh ideas, think about new things, look at ways things can be improved, bring energy, enthusiasm, fun. But their needs are around some of that personal approval, and they don't enjoy kind of getting bogged down in the detail. So then the final style is the amiables, so the yellow style. And they are very much focused around relationships. So in their communication, they'll always be considering, how does this impact the relationship here? They are friendly, they're supportive, they're very much relationship driven, but their needs are around personal security and understanding how they fit within those teams. So their strengths are that they're really flexible and adaptable. They're a really good people barometer, so they can kind of gauge the temperature check in the team. They're often a balanced personality, and they'll seek views and opinions of others. So it's great to have an amiable on your team, because they'll always know what everyone else is thinking. They'll be able to bring in other people's ideas into whatever the final decision might be. And what they really want to do is to get buy-in, for people to feel comfortable, and for that kind of harmony and teamwork. So you can really see that orientation towards relationship coming through in these kind of strengths and wants. Some of the fears of the amiable style are kind of criticism and conflict, around upsetting people, or for them not being valued, or others not being valued, or being misled. Some of their weaknesses might be that, because their focus is so much on kind of the relationship and harmony, that they might end up being a bit like, la 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 la, it's not happening. So in a bit of denial about when things are changing. And also, because they're so concerned about others and relationships and harmony, they might not assert their own needs. So might not put their own needs first, or will put the needs of others before theirs. And again, because they're worried about the relationships, they will often not take action for fear of upsetting others. So amiables are great to have on the team, because they will be the ones that will really understand like what's going on in the team. They'll have the temperature check. They'll know who's up, who's down, who's on board with your ideas. Will always seek others' inputs. They are just very relationship driven. But the challenge of that is that you might not always know what their own needs are. They'll be communicating for others and on behalf of others often, without putting their needs first. So,
what do you mean about to get buy-in? Wants to get buy-in?
Buy-in. So everybody to be in agreement. With a project. So to buy into our new idea, so that everybody is like on board with it, everybody is in agreement and thinks that it's a good idea.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Does that make sense? Sorry, a bit of more corporate lingo there. Any other questions on this as we've kind of rattled through these 4 styles? Any questions? So we can use these styles. We can all use these styles and move around kind of which elements, focusing on ask and tell, focusing on kind of being more expressive or perhaps more considered in our communications. But we'll definitely have a preference, perhaps between 1 or 2 styles. So as I've talked through some of those traits of those communication styles, perhaps you begin to identify where you might sit on those. So let's move on to the model. So are you able, so if you can pop on annotate, and if possible, can you write your name on the model where you think that you might sit? So maybe you're kind of a bit between 2. Perhaps you acknowledge like, maybe I'm a bit driver, but I'm also a bit expressive. Maybe you're really clear that, I'm analytical or I'm amiable. but if you can write your name on the model, no judgment here, we're all like, none of the styles is better or worse. Just so that then I can try and do some complicated breakout room action so that you can have a conversation in your groups. So if you can jump on to annotate and write on the model where you think you might sit. Okay, Vicky, so are you kind of dancing between analytical and driver? Where are you? Where are you, Vicky?
I am kind of between them two, but I think I'm also sometimes getting to expressive. It really depends, I think, on a situation and on what's going on and who I'm actually talking to. Yeah.
But you notice some of the elements of analytical and driver as I was talking through. Yeah. And you are joined by Helena as well, kind of floating on the middle there. Okay, who else have we got? So Nadia, you're feeling quite clear that you're an analytical. Caitlin, Antonia, Kinga, you're dancing between amiable and analytical, are you? So if the rest of you can just pop your names on the screen so that I can put you into groups. So we've got 6 of you at the moment. So Sophie, if you're back with us, if you can pop on the model where you are. George, if you can pop on the model where you are. Marina. Antonia. George, is that you up in the driver?
Hey, sorry, no, I've just come back on. Sorry, I just had a call from Iona's rep, so I was a little bit preoccupied. Where do I click? What do I?
What did you hear and what didn't you hear? Did you hear?
I haven't heard anything for the last half an hour. Sorry.
Oh no. Okay. So quick recap then. We have just run through this communication model. So looking at different communication styles between whether we're more focused around telling, more focused around asking, perhaps more and on the horizontal axis, more perhaps outwardly expressive about how we feel about something when we're communicating, like I love it, or whether at the top end of that axis is perhaps like, no, I really enjoy that. So perhaps it's not that I'm more enthusiastic, it's just that how I communicate my feelings and how so it might be more considered, whereas the high responsive is more sort of perhaps animated in how I display my emotions. And so these give us 4 styles, which we've just run through, and I can run back over those in a second. So having gone through each of those 4 styles, I was asking everybody to sort of mark on the model where they felt they sat. So at the moment, we've got Helena and Vicky kind of dancing between the analytical and the driver style. Nadia is very clear that she's analytical. Sophie, Caitlin, and Antonia are all dancing along the line of analytical and amiable. Who is the green wiggly line? Is that you, Marina?
It's me. I'm sorry, I'm from the phone, so I can't really.
Okay.
Right.
Yes, no worries. So you feel obviously clear that you're a driver style, is it? Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Good. And is that question mark somebody up there as well? Who is that? So the reason I'm getting you to write on here is to sort of hear a bit from you about what you're noticing on the model. And then I'm going to get you to move into group work to sort of talk with your styles about what is it that you might be doing that could be causing stress in others. So we've talked about each of those styles and kind of some of their strengths and some of their weaknesses. And you can see how some of them are quite polar opposite in terms of maybe how much information they like to receive when being communicated with, perhaps the level or the pace as well, so how fast they like to communicate, as well as so the levels of detail or levels of emotion. So what So George, do you want me to quickly run back over them so that you have an idea, so that you can join in the group discussions? I can run back over them, and then perhaps if people also want to take screenshots as you're going into group work, because I'm going to ask you to think about your style. So I think like Marina's really clear, Nadia's really clear. Helena and Vicky are thinking a bit more, I'm not really sure. So perhaps some time to think about, what is it about my style that might be causing kind of stress or not getting the best from others? Sophie, Caitlin, Antonia and Kinga, I love how you're all like dancing on the line between analytical and amiable. Do you feel you've got a strong preference either way, or you notice elements of both? What would you say? Is there one that feels a little bit stronger? Maybe I'll come to.
I think for me, it's a combination of both. I'm really good at planning, which also goes to like driven, being resourceful, because in order to plan something, and if something doesn't work out, you need to on the spot think of something that would work. And that requires being resourceful. Respect, I think it comes in all styles. You want respect no matter what. But it is sort of that changeable personalities that you need to adapt, because not only you need to focus on the task itself and finding solutions for that, if you do clash with different personalities, you'll need to look for solutions and a way to approach other people as well. So that's an additional thing that you need to think of. But it also goes with being amiable, like flexible. I like to be flexible to an extent, not to give too much flexibility. Having that balanced personality and value other people's opinions, making others feel comfortable in their skin and what they're doing. So encouraging them to work in a team and seek their views and opinions, because it's going to benefit me as well as the whole team in general. But I do fear criticism and also not being valued. I think everyone's got that thing of having that fear of being criticized. If we're not confident in an aspect, we're all going to face sort of a bit of criticism, which we may not be confident for or ready for. So it's just that sort of thing. It can be sustained, or you can work with it if you've got enough knowledge or experience, whatever it is. But I think that would be my response, and that's why I'm in between of analytical and amiable. But I think majority of us can agree we've got a bit of aspects of each.
Absolutely. And one way to kind of help to think about what our preference is. So Kinga, you were talking about, I'm good at planning. So remembering that it's less about us and our personalities, and more about how do we either like to communicate with others, or how do we like to be communicated with. So if you're thinking about how you communicate with your team, or how you like to receive communication, where does that sit? Antonia, do you have any thoughts on that? So you're also floating on that line.
For sure, I am analytical and amiable, because I want what now I like, and before, of course, I realized I want to be comfortable for other people, to be sometimes so sweet. And this is really, I don't like in my personality, because very often my emotions are suppressed. So I keep it inside. I don't show. I try to be just. I try to be good for another people. So especially on board. I am very analytical. I think sometimes what I have to say, and sometimes I just keep quiet.
Okay, so not kind of putting your needs first.
And if I need to do some criticism or development feedback, I prepare myself. I repeat it a few times, and I found a good moment because I don't different other people.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Caitlin, any thoughts like where you're floating between the two?
Yeah, I mean, when we were going through the analytical side, I was like, oh yeah, that's me. And then we went through amiable, and I think majority, if I was being really black and white about it, I think majority of amiable would apply to me. But then I think I have got some elements of the analytical, but I think a lot, mainly the weaknesses, to be honest.
Oh, really? Okay.
But then I was sort of thrown by the like low responsiveness and high responsiveness. I'd say I'd probably, like in terms of how I outwardly express myself in response to things, I'd probably say I'm more of a thinker than a, oh my God. Like,
yeah. So, but that's on that. Yeah.
Back up towards. So I think, quite a mix of both really, but maybe more amiable.
And also remembering that like kind of the world of work also forces us to be a bit more in the kind of analytical driver styles, doesn't it? Because often, like if we're working on a project or something, we need to be really clear about what's happening, and that need, you know, communications need to be like that. But perhaps when we're thinking it, we're at our most free, how we communicate, that will often help to tell us where our preferences are. So a quick whiz back, and then if you want to take screenshots, perhaps of all four, because what I'm going to ask you to do, and Sophie, Caitlin, Antonia, Kinga, maybe think about whether you want to be in a group together to think about this, or whether you have a preference one way or the other, if you want to join the analytical group, or if you want to join the amiable group, or if you want to kind of be in the middle and think about what that means to have an element of both. That's also fine. But I'll go back so you can take screenshots. Then I'll ask you to do a bit of individual reflection about kind of what you might need to think about for your communication style. And then I'm going to put you into groups to think about what is it in your communication style that might be causing stress in others and what you might need to do differently. So if we whiz back to the beginning, I'm just going to take a screenshot of this so I can do complicated breakout rooms. And then,
Caitlin, sorry, can I ask you a favor? Can you put the description of or four so I can take a screenshot?
Yeah, I'm just about to go back through them, but I just had to clear that so I could go back so your names weren't floating everywhere. Oh, I'm going all the way back now. So analytical, so quick whiz through for George and a reminder for you all, and then an opportunity for you to take a screenshot. So analytical is really oriented around kind of thinking, being very thoughtful, having that reserved communication style, perhaps a slower speed of communication. And the analytical style really likes to be right. Strengths are that they're really good at planning and taking in that logical approach. The kind of downsides being that they don't really like to have those emotional decisions and can kind of get stuck in that analysis paralysis. So maybe taking a quick screenshot of that before we move on to the next one. Then the driver style. So they are very action oriented, decisive, fast-paced communication. They really want to focus on getting the results. So it's great to have a driver on the team because they'll really focus on what needs to get done. But the downsides are that they might only consider their own viewpoint, so less about bringing in others' ideas and kind of creating, getting buy-in from others. So if you want to take a quick screenshot of that one. Then the expressive style. So they are much more, focused around spontaneity. They're enthusiastic, full of energy in their communications, creative and innovative. They don't like a lot of detail and can get easily distracted, but they'll bring energy, enthusiasm, inspiration, focus on what other possibilities, but don't like to get bogged down in the detail. So if you want to take a quick screenshot of that one. And then the last but not least is the amiable. So their strengths are that they are really focused around the relationships and harmony and creating input from others. They're friendly, supportive, very much relationship driven, flexible and adaptable, and really good at understanding what's going on in the team, having that temperature check. But their downsides can be that they might avoid and don't enjoy any kind of criticism or conflict, and that they might not assert and put forward their own needs because they're worried about others. So all different communication styles there, remembering it's about communication styles and not about personality, which gives us the 4 styles, which then, so if I think about putting you into groups, Sophie's saying internet might be bad at the moment. I've missed a couple of things. I want to put my name between analytical and driver. Okay, let's work this out. So if you want to have a think about where you recognize you are on that model, having a think about what can you do to maybe adjust your communication style in order to communicate effectively with others. So if perhaps you've got more of an analytical preference, thinking about those other styles, so driver style, expressive style, amiable style, what might you need to do differently to communicate effectively with them? Thinking about, how fast you communicate, levels of detail, how expressive you are. So what are some of the things that you might need to do to adjust your style? So have some reflection on that while I try and do some breakout rooms for you. Sophie's saying bad internet. She's between analytical and driver. Okay, so I'm just going to go on mute while I put you into groups whilst you do some thinking about what you can do to adjust your style. Okay, so hopefully a few moments for you to think about what can you do to adapt your style. So we'll move into group work. So just to double check in where you want to be. So I have got in the driver room on her own though is Marina. In the analytical room, currently on her own, is Nadia. On the kind of amiable and analytical, so dancing on that line, I've got Antonia, Caitlin and Kinga. And between analytical and driver, I've got Helena and Victoria. So George, have you got any thoughts about where you want to be?
Yeah, I think I reading through those, I put myself in the analytical box.
Analytical, okay. So you in the analytical, so you'll be with Nadia. And then Sophie, you want to be across analytical and driver, don't you?
Yes, I do, please.
Right, okay. So the only person then that's going to be working on her own is Marina. So Marina, I don't know if you want to just stay in the main room with me or if you want to do some thinking on your own. That's up to you. I will, let's go. So what you're going to do then in those groups.
I'm happy to go, I'm happy to go in any other room and just listen to their thoughts and opinion.
Maybe I'll put you in with the analyticals and drivers, between analytical and driver.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I want you to do is in your groups then, thinking about your social style. So which of your style is your strongest preference, or kind of if you're dancing between the two, what are some of the strong characteristics of those? But what is it about your social style, your communication style, that might cause stress in those other three styles? So that's number one. So what are you doing to cause stress in the others? And then in your opinion, thinking about your communication style, what do you think the other three styles need to do better to communicate with you better in that group? So is it about levels of information? Is it about speed, emotion, spontaneity, slow, logical approach? So first of all, thinking about what it is that your style might be doing to cause stress in others. And then thinking about what the others might need to do to communicate better with you. So in your groups, making sure that you're taking some notes, because I'm going to ask you to report back in your groups about A, what you think you're doing, and B, what you think the others should be doing. And so then we'll be able to hear back from everyone. Interestingly, we don't have anyone in the expressives preference for communication style. So maybe I'll have to do the representation of that. We don't have a representative for that. Marina has a strong preference for driver, but she'll go in with the analyticals. And so maybe take a screenshot of the questions here. Make sure you take some notes because you need to report back, and agree in your group which one of you or how you're going to report back to us. Okay. Any questions before I whiz you off into your breakout rooms? Any questions? Okay, so George is going to be with Nadia, Antonia, Caitlin and Kinga are together, Helena, Marina, Sophie and Victoria. I'll open the rooms now. I'm going to give you 15 minutes to have that discussion. Okay. Actually, no, let's say 20. We've probably got enough time to do 20 because we probably need to have quite a big discussion, and you're in quite big groups as well. So I'll give you 20 minutes in those groups. Okay, so remembering that you need to report back to us, you're going to need to tell us what we need to do in the different styles. Okay, all right, so any questions, pop back to the main room, or you can also ask for help in your room and I can jump into your room. What I might do is also jump in and out of your rooms this time, so just contracting on that I might come in and just check in that you're doing okay and if you've got any questions. Okay, all right, so I'm opening the rooms now and I will see you back in 20 minutes. Okay, so welcome back from your discussions. I hope that you had a good opportunity to think about what is it about your style that might be causing stress in others, what you might want to be doing differently, and what the other 3 styles need to be doing differently to communicate well with you. So any groups want to go first, or am I going to pick on you? Who would like to go first? Which group would like to go first?
We can start off.
I'm happy.
Okay. So
yeah.
we'll have the amiable analyticals going first, and then maybe the analyticals can chip in, see what they've got to say. Okay, so Kinga, you were with Caitlin and Antonia. So tell us, what is it, do you think, about your styles that might be causing stress in others? And everyone else, have a listen and think about if you are in the opposite styles, whether you think that's true or not, and we'll have a bit of a discussion around that.
We all sort of said we can't pinpoint to a certain style. We've got a bit of all.
Yeah.
From my side, when it comes to sort of the style I would more likely to use would be the analytical, using the logical, irrational aspects and ideas, which majority of the time has caused stress and conflict and whatever it was at that situation, because due to stress it sort of hinders the logical process and you lose the sight of the actual picture and the whole picture itself, and in order to get to that whole picture you've got little steps that you need to accomplish or succeed or execute, and sort of that was my bit of lacking the logical and rational, which I would change. Again, it had an influence on the team, and also making emotional decisions, decision based on what you were feeling at a certain time, and that sort of maybe was a bit driven from the path that it should be. So I was more leaning towards the amiable of having flexibility, allowing criticism to occur, and not failure. From what Antonia said, her confidence has decreased a little bit. I don't know whether Antonia, do you want to say this, or I'll let you speak on that?
Yes, sure, you can.
Oh, okay.
Please, tell it.
So what Antonia said, she said that her confidence is a bit lacking, and she's feeling a bit of being in a shadow. Due to lack of confidence. So through the use of expressiveness and expressive style, and a bit of a driver style, the confidence will increase, and that means she's given an example of people going in a galley and doing whatever they want to do while she was doing her own work, and it's just finding that confidence within the driver's style, because as she said, there is a bit of a language barrier. She doesn't feel confident in pronunciation, in speaking, and I'm measuring people that, for me, you know, English isn't my first language, so although I'm confident in some aspects, you know, oh, am I saying this correctly? And in hers, she's got that bit of a step back because of language barrier, because of pronunciation. So finding that confidence within the driven driver's style, she'll be able to sort of enforce, this is my workspace, please don't, you know, disrupt or interrupt me, and do whatever you need to do when it's the right time. But in order to do that, she needs to have the confidence. And it's also, I think, from her side, she's seen as not being viewed as special or valued. She's like, I think she's been pushed to the side. And another example she used was the fact that the chief stew wants to take control of her, and getting engaged into her work, which is very commonly seen on boats and yachts, and I personally witnessed that as well.
Some good examples there of like how you're feeling in your styles. Were you able to have a discussion about what is it about kind of where you're standing in terms of your preferences, your communication styles, that might be causing stress in the other styles in your teams or as you're communicating with others?
Caitlin, do you want to pop in?
Yeah, I was talking about a personal example of that. I was thinking I'm very much more amiable, I think, and just a situation on my last boat where I was kind of being taken advantage of in one respect, and I was kind of just being like, okay, don't want to rock the boat, sort of like, that's fine, leave it as it is. Whereas the first mate was getting really really frustrated and upset on my behalf. I think he's very much more of a like driver side, and he was just like, he was actually going to the captain and saying like, no, this, whereas I'm just yeah. Like, you need to do this with, like, treat Caitlin like this, and I'm just there like, okay, no, it's fine, like I'll just sort of just not being the most confident type thing. So I think in terms of what might cause stress from an how an amiable style may cause stress to other styles, in that way, like, I mean, I can only really think of him like as a driver, sort of, that side of things. Like, he was getting very frustrated at my response to how I was being treated, because obviously it's very different to how he would respond. In terms of, I was very much more like conscious of how like the team was working or how I was being viewed and type thing, whereas he was like, no, this should be happening like this. And
because for a driver, they're very much orientated towards like action and decisiveness and wanting to see results, and you're like, don't worry, it's fine, like, don't worry, come on.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah.
Okay, Kinga, Antonia, were you able to acknowledge how your sort of style preferences? So it sounds like you are kind of, Antonia, you're kind of trying out all of the different styles, and Kinga, you're kind of dancing between analytical and amiable, but also trying on the different styles as well. Were you able to see how your styles might cause stress in others?
I think it's a bit difficult to say, will it cause stress? I'm sorry, I'm a bit confused when you said that it's a communication style rather than a personal trait. And because, as we mentioned in the group when we were chatting, I think you have to have a personal trait or skills in order to then communicate it through to another person.
Sure.
For example, being confident, or am I seeing this wrong?
So this model is not really based around personality, but it's about like our communication style. So it's less about personality, more about how we like to be communicated with. Underneath that, there are obviously elements of personality, like the expressives wanting to be sort of seen and recognized, the amiables wanting, to be harmony and like have kudos around that. But it's important to remember, it's instead of using this model like a personality like the colors or disc or something. It's more about what is my preference when I'm communicating, and what is my preference when I'm being communicated with. Like, how much detail do I like? How fast do I communicate? Of course, underneath our styles, it's driven by also personality preferences. But remembering that this, I guess, just to say, this model is much more about communication style than personality.
Right, okay. What I was about to say was, I don't know which one it goes into, which style it goes, but when we said about sort of silent treatment, majority of the times you have to sort of keep your mouth shut instead of expressing your opinion or your feeling. And for others, it may be interpreted as a silent treatment. You know, that can also affect, you know, cause stress in the other styles. But I don't know which one.
Okay. And so in your group, what did you come up with in terms of, for the other 3 styles, if you're being communicated with from those 3 styles, did you come up with any ideas around what they could do better to communicate with you better in the other styles?
We actually, when the timer went 2 minutes, we were like, oh my God, it's been 20 minutes already. We kind of went off a bit too much on the first one and just general discussion about the styles. So we didn't even really get to the second question.
Okay. Have you got any thoughts about that in terms of how you might like others to be communicating with you based on your preferences?
I guess, I mean, sometimes when you're being told like, oh, just do this, like that, it doesn't really sit very well. And you would kind of want people to be a bit less direct sometimes, not less direct, but more conscious of how they're coming across. Or I'm kind of thinking just about driver really, but not 100% sure.
Okay. Antonia, have you got any thoughts on that?
Some thought about second question, or about
about the second question.
I'm not sure if I will be right now, but I think what to do for 3 styles. First of all, I should to stop not taking action for fear of upsetting others people, because it's too much in me. I have to stop it and stop being misled. This is what I really need to work about this for maybe jump on driver a little bit more, because before, like I told in our room, I was more driver. Now, because it's in this industry, I don't speak my own language, and I'm struggling with English. So I try to be more, but like I said before, more comfortable for everyone. If some people say, "What did you say?" This what? I said, it's okay, nothing. All right. And I try and voice. So I have to be more confident and create energy and purpose. This I'm missing a lot. So I need to create. I don't know if it makes sense.
Absolutely makes sense. It sounds like you're very clear about
if I understood these questions very good, and concentrate on confidence and decisiveness. Yes, I have to concentrate. I will work. Just after this session, I start to tell everyone, Gala is my department. Adios.
Somebody's fire alarm's going off, or everybody okay? Is there a fire alarm going off?
Thank you.
Antonia, great. It sounds like you've identified some real like personal action points there. Let's hear from the other group. So you guys were thinking about, Antonia.
I'm sorry. I would like to tell, if I start to speak here in our course more, it's made me more confident. It's first step.
Please, we would love to hear your voice more.
Yeah, thank you.
Please. Thank you, Antonia. So I think that's a personal challenge to all of us to encourage Antonia to talk more. Great. Okay, so let's go. I've just shut the breakout room, so now I can't see who's who. Let's go to the analytical. So George and Nadia. So this first group were kind of amiable, analytical. Sounds like kind of you were all kind of bordering a bit more on the amiable, but also trying on some of the different styles. George, Nadia, how did you get on in your group in terms of thinking about your social style and what might cause stress in others?
Yeah, we definitely both put ourselves in the analytical box, and I think in our group we probably could have done with a driver. We were quite good at talking, but then we had to kind of focus on actually getting some answers out of this at the end.
Yes.
But yeah, it's good to speak to you. So what did we get here? Some what is it about my social styles that causes stress in others? So there's something that we got the 3 points down: speed of communication. I'm sure Vicky will testify to this, but it's not necessarily one of my fortes. I'm quite happy to talk and have a long conversation and go through things. And I think speed and communicate. Thanks for nodding, Vicky. Speed and communication would be something that could definitely cause stress in other styles, and improving that would no doubt help that kind of situation.
Yeah.
Nadia placed an area on sort of to be focused on goals, and this was with, I think this was with the expressive, and so to actually try and find goals at the end of it to try and get through, rather than being maybe a little bit wishy-washy and not really getting there and enjoying the process, but to actually focus on a goal to get there at the end.
Yes.
And we also mentioned about lots of information. I just don't remember which one this was in. This is in analytical, and it's something that I know I struggled with, and with some crew members who are very experienced, they may not need that second opinion so much, so may run away with tasks. But to have an overview when you have this many crew, I find it quite important to have a good information flow, and so that tasks aren't just undertaken and maybe gone in the wrong direction or something. So they were sort of our points for the first parts. What the other 3 styles need to do better to communicate with us. Nadia pointed out about drivers, and which I think was really interesting, thinking about repercussions, and actually drew on it from her own experiences about where she thinks about what she has to say, and that makes it more of her analytical approach. But a driver may just come out and, as you said earlier, this, without necessarily taking the time to think about what you're actually saying, or to think about the repercussions, and to slow it down a little bit, which goes against what Nadia described as her own style. I hope that sounds about right there, Nadia. And
yes, yeah.
and so that would hopefully help in that situation. And we talked about, again, we discussed goals, and with the more expressive style, about actually maybe having, if it's taught through a plan and the analytical person has discussed a plan and having goals at the end of it, but maybe again the more expressive style that maybe a bit more enjoying the process and wishy-washy may get to the end goal, rather than not frustrating the analytical person. Nadia, was there other points that we discussed there and missed? Sorry, my notes are horrendous.
No, these are, yeah.
Great. I'm loving how the analyticals are kind of viewing the expressives as a bit wishy-washy.
Sorry, I couldn't think of
correct? And I feel a bit underrepresented in this group. Nobody else is in the expressive box with me. But it's really interesting how
I couldn't think of a better way.
Flip it the other way. So from the expressive style, as an analytical, and you're coming in with the detail, coming in with the logic, absolutely thinking things through, kind of slow paced, wanting to know all the next steps, wanting to get to the goals. The expressives are like, can we just get on and kind of make a decision? Do we have to really check all these boxes? Do I need to give you all these emails? So you were saying how you like to have that kind of list of tasks, like what's going on. Just bearing in mind, if you've got expressives in your team, they're probably like, yeah, whatever, who needs an email? Let's just get on and do it. Like, So just remembering that, like both ways, and how it can cause stress. Whereas for an analytical, you're like, I need to know what's happening. Can somebody just step by step, just tell me what's happening? I need to know the detail. And the expressives are like, yeah, whatever. Like, let's just get it done.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I think you've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah. So yeah, just bearing in mind how we are perceived by the other styles as well. Okay, great. So last but not least, we had the larger group of the analytical drivers. So Helena, Marina, Sophie, and Victoria. And I know some of you were feeling like, oh, there's a lot of information to go through these 4 styles. It was feeling a little bit overwhelming. How did you get on in your discussions? Tell us.
So yeah, we were kind of a bit, I think, conflicted with all the information and and all the different styles kind of saying that I think a lot of the time you have to be a little bit of everything, and you have to consider everyone in your team and all those around you that you're working with. But so some of the stresses that we thought it might cause was if you're leaning more towards the driver side style, a bit of a dominant communication style, obviously, in which case some of the other styles might feel very either taken aback, too scared to communicate, and a lot of their fears will then come true, and they will see it. We've also said that sometimes in those views you might not always realize when others feel like they are out of touch. If you can't really, if you're not always that good at, if you're I think the one with the person barometer, if you don't have a very good idea of that, you'll just carry on, plowing through what needs to be done without ever taking into consideration that there's people either falling behind. And then we also said, like with the amiable style is that, so one of theirs was that they're in denial about change, which we said might be very difficult if they need a bit more time to adapt to the change. Whereas if you're looking to analytical too, if you are quite logical, if you feel like just changing things because it seems like a more logic way to go about something, if they are in denial about change, it might take them a bit of time, or they might find it difficult to just immediately jump into doing something differently. So yeah, we said that. And then for question 2, we said to communicate better. So from other styles, again, I think it would also depend on people's personalities and exactly how many of certain communication styles you have within a group of people working together. But probably easier said than done, but speaking up when they are feeling lost or driven too hard. I know sometimes they might feel like they're too scared to say something, but again, they also need to communicate in order for it to be effective communication for all parties. Yeah, and we just said basically to not be afraid to approach or follow up in situations, and to just feel more comfortable. Again, I think communication is absolutely key in whichever one of those you feel. If you're communicating openly to the people you need to, then I think that'll help a team run efficiently.
Sophie, Victoria, anything else? Marina, you were very clear that you were driver style, weren't you?
Yes, but I think
which is very clear driver style as well.
No, actually, I think I moved more to analytical point. Okay. I don't know. I'm a little bit lost.
Okay.
I think I need to do this analyze of communication with my team members, so I will understand where they are and they will understand where I am, and try to communicate kind of like in between. I don't, it depends. I believe that all team members have to realize what kind of communication they're using, and especially us, if we are becoming managers, we need to understand people and find a way how we can communicate so that the goal will be achieved.
Absolutely.
In our group, I believe that, as we can see on the picture, it's more task orientated. So I like the word that George used, wishy-washy. I really, yeah.
You're going to be labeled with that now, George.
Yeah.
Just that you think I'm wishy-washy, that's fine.
Yeah, and it depends on the situation. When we are quite busy, we don't have really time to explain stuff and communicate that much and go to into the feelings more.
Yeah.
So yeah, kind of basically find a middle point where we can all meet.
Yeah, absolutely. And the purpose of us, exploring this model today is just for us to gain a better awareness around where might our preferences be. Where might we kind of often kind of default to when we're communicating, and thinking about what might that impact be on others who might have a different preference to us, and increasing our awareness around others will have different preferences to us, and that we'll flex and change our style, the way that we do our management styles, but also thinking about when we're doing certain communications, how are we doing those, and what could we do differently to adapt our style in order to be able to influence others and for our communications to be well received. Recognizing that you've already identified some areas where we might cause stress in each other's style, particularly around those kind of opposites on the model. So just being aware is just building our awareness around what might be some of my natural preferences, and what are the preferences, in my team. And particularly when we're under stress and pressure, we'll kind of default into certain styles. So remembering that as well. I mean, if you think about certain email communications that you might have received, when sometimes they felt a bit like, either a bit harsh, or they felt like, you're trawling through and you're like, I can't see what there's so much information in here. And you think about maybe the style preference that person has who's written the email communication, and why it might feel jarring to you thinking about your email. Your communication style preference. If from an expressives point of view, if they receive like a really long detailed email, and you're like, hang on, what just tell me what I need to do. What do we need to do? Just tell me. I don't need all this detail. Whereas if a very short email to an analytical might be like, okay, so where's the detail around this? I need more information. And vice versa with the driver's communication can often be about like quick, fast paced, like really focusing on, we need to do this, 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 and this. And from the amiable's point of view, they're like, hey, wait, hang on. Has anyone asked for my input? Have we checked out that how other people are feeling about this? Has anybody else got any good ideas? So it can just bearing in mind what our preferences and what the preferences of others might be. So some things to think about, and you touched along many of these as you were talking through your style. So really thinking about in conversation, thinking about the speed of your speech. So if you're thinking about your style and the style of others, how fast are you talking? Expressives will often have a tendency to talk a lot faster, for instance, and drivers as well. They'll be very fast paced in their communication. Analyticals, perhaps a lot more reserved, a bit slower. And thinking about the amount of data that you're communicating. So what is your preference? What's the preference of the other people in your team, or your team overall? How much information are you including? Are there questions? How many questions? Are you inviting input? Are you not inviting input? Perhaps being clear about why you're not inviting input. Are you asking for immediate decisions? For an analytical, that could be really stressful, because you're like, hang on, I need to think about and take into consideration all of the information here. whereas expressives might be like, yep, okay, let's just do that, and a driver will be pushing for that. Driver will be really wanting to be decisive, fast-paced, come on, let's move on to the next thing because we want to focus on the results. Thinking about the level of detail that you're going into in your communication. Too much, too little can be stressful for different styles. And kind of focusing around the feelings, so how people are, or kind of focusing on facts. So for an amiable, if you're communicating, particularly with a driver and also an analytical, if you're really focusing on talking about, well, I think people are feeling this, they're just going to be wanting to know some of the harder facts often, and vice versa. Thinking about where are you focusing in terms of feeling or facts. So there's a lot, I'm mindful that there's a lot to take in there in terms of the 4 different styles, kind of thinking about where your preference might be, where the preferences of others might be. But hopefully an opportunity for you to think about where your preference is and what you could be doing a little bit differently. So in terms of some sort of top tips around applying those social styles, so it's important for us to, as I've said, like be aware of our own preferred style and the impact that that might be having on others. And being clear that there is no right style. So your preference isn't the right way, my way, or the highway. But that it's important for us to sort of show respect and flexibility towards the other preferences and styles. And that when we are communicating, that we're thinking about how can we adjust this in order to have best influence and for your communication to be received positively. So thinking about going forward, so just wrapping up this morning, but perhaps some reflection question to you is perhaps thinking about a work relationship that you might be finding a bit difficult or you would like to improve, and taking some time to reflect on this model and thinking about what is your social style, what's your communication style preference, and also what do you notice about the other person's communication style preference. And what does this model say that you might need to think about doing a bit differently? How could you adapt your communication to be able to communicate more effectively? And how will you know that you're successful? So some reflection questions for you to take away. I'm mindful of time. We're right on time. Has anyone got any questions before we finish for today?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So we discussed about all of this, us as a group.
Yeah.
I have a question. What about, it's actually a very good example for George and Victoria because they're in the same team and they basically doing this course and talking about this, they're thinking about these communication styles between them also and the other team members. So we will have a discussion. I mean, we will have a think of what's the communication style, me with the other team members and the other team members with me. But do you suggest a conversation with them so they will think about the communication styles that they are using and how they will understand my communication style? So from the other side, you know, so they will be aware and I will be aware and we can meet somewhere in the middle. Do you think that
Absolutely.
it's a good idea?
Yeah, always. And I think as you build your awareness, it might be that you recognize, so I don't know, perhaps thinking about with your manager, with your boss, and their emails often like cause stress in you, but you didn't know why. And now looking at this model, perhaps you understand why. Perhaps there's never enough detail. Perhaps there's too much detail. So it perhaps helps you find a bit of a language to talk about. Actually, it would be really helpful when you email, if you could just provide a bit more information. I need a bit more information and I don't like to make decisions quickly. Or it just helps you to think about how do you like to be communicated with as well. So from your team, from your manager, as well as how do you communicate with others. George was saying he recognized that sort of sometimes he likes to go through the detail and that some people are like, no. George, I don't know if you've got anything to add there, but you were talking about how also speed of communication might be causing stress in others. So just kind of recognizing that. But yeah, I would definitely encourage that kind of two-way conversation around how you like to communicate and be communicated with. And perhaps explaining your style, like, actually, I need to give you a lot of detail because you need to understand this before you can do the task. I recognize that might not be your preference, but bear with me. Yeah. Does that help, Marina?
Yes, thank you. I found now when I'm thinking, I wasn't thinking like this, of course, but now when we're talking about that, I saw the communication styles, I would say the people above me and the people, I don't know, below me, whatever. So yeah, I can understand some points that they were talking about, but yeah, it's a good thing that if both ways are aware of the communication.
Yeah. Great. Any other questions before we finish for today? See something in chat. Antonia's got to leave. Antonia's popped off. Any other questions before we finish for today? No? Okay. So we will meet again on Friday. Friday is the Q&A session. So there'll actually be a bit of input for me on the theme of communication for this week. So we'll be exploring a bit about listening and questioning, as well as an opportunity for you to bring questions. And we'll hopefully be able to use a methodology for you to explore some of your questions and real life challenges as well. So have a think ahead of Friday in terms of if there's a challenge you're facing at work, or a question that you're really holding, that you'd like a bit of space and time to think through, bring that with you on Friday. If there's some specific questions that you'd like me to kind of talk to a bit, please email those to me ahead of Friday morning so that we can run through those. And otherwise, I look forward to seeing you on Friday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. See
Thank
you
you
on
all.
Friday.